The Able to Care podcast is sponsored by Able Training Support Limited, who build partnerships with organisations to develop confidence and competence in their team to promote positive outcomes for all. Find the link in the description. Hello and welcome to the Able to Care podcast. I'm your host, Andy Baker, and joining me today is Alison Kerr. Alison is joining us from up north somewhere, as you'll recognise from her accent. So Alison is a 37-year-old neurodivergent single parent of an 18-year-old neurodivergent daughter. And originally growing up in a chaotic household, Alison was unaware of how her and her family's neurodiversity contributed towards her sensitivity, her mental health struggles over her life, and a diminished self-esteem. And it wasn't until her mid-20s, while struggling with her mental health, that Alison sought help, which set her on a path of learning, healing, and self-development. So after over 3 decades of studying holistic therapies and better understanding herself, Alison now guides, advocates, and supports other highly sensitive people, particularly those with ADHD. So thank you so much for joining us today, Alison.
Thank you very much. I have to correct you, first of all, and I'm really pleased that you think I could get away with being 37. I'm 57. So.
Oh, sorry, did I say so? It says it on my screen there, but yeah, well, I just thought I'll throw you a compliment in there. Do you know what I mean? People watching will think 37.
I feel 37, but my point with that is I struggled with this for 56 years without any understanding. So I may not be an expert in ADHD, but I've learned a lot. And one of the things that we do is hyper-focus. So this information was learned through my daughter's journey, which I'll talk about. But she had finally come to me and said, and this is the joys of TikTok, basically. She kept seeing things and related to them. And she said, Mum, I think I've got ADHD. And I think you have too. So we started testing. So to be clear, neither of us have been officially diagnosed yet because the waiting lists are horrendous. But we've both been put forward for diagnosis, and I'm at a stage where I've learned enough. I've grown up in a family of neurodiverse people, and the more you learn, you start recognizing it in other people.
Yeah, definitely. So that's quite interesting. So when you talked about in the opening there, you said in your 20s, you obviously went through a period of depression, and even though it didn't last long, it was quite severe by the sounds of it, from what you've kind of told me. So that started this journey of self-discovery, I take it.
Yes.
But that's not the time you realised anything about neurodiversity. You hadn't made that connection. So what was the kind of the exploration that you did at that time then?
So I grew up in a really chaotic household. I now fully believe my dad was also neurodiverse. I'll never know because he's passed away. And I don't know what was going on with my mum, but, there was a lot of emotional explosion, no support, no emotional support. They did their best. I have total compassion for their struggles now. However, for me, it was just a lot of criticism, a lot of physical punishment, and then that kind of got carried on at school as well. I was the most belted girl in the year at school. I would get punishment lines. I'd get told to stand in the corner, humiliated in the class. So not really getting supported or that understanding anywhere. And I didn't realise that I just got told I was too touchy, too sensitive, talk too much, and that's one of the things that's worth a mention. People with neurodiversity get corrected thousands and thousands and thousands of times. And that's why, as a parent, being that support and that encouragement for them, and giving that compassion and understanding is so important, because that's where the kind of self-loathing and shame comes from. That's really, really part of neurodiversity from the people I have spoken to. So I didn't realize that I was living in a state of anxiety, hypervigilance, fight or flight, cortisol, adrenaline. That was just the way I existed. And I didn't realize that everybody else didn't exist that way. And I didn't really understand that what I was experiencing was depression because we did not talk about emotions in our family. And that's another really important thing. One of the best ways that you can support your, and I'm just going to say highly sensitive child, because it doesn't mean that they're definitely neurodiverse. All people that are neurodiverse are highly sensitive. Not everybody that's highly sensitive is definitely neurodiverse.
It's quite interesting you mentioned that, Alison, as far as so obviously there's a lot of kind of studies that suggest that neurodiversity is hereditary to some degree or another, but it's very difficult to quantify that related to, so based on twin studies and things like that they've kind of done it, but there's never 100% correlation even with identical twins. So although there is a significant hereditary predisposition, but there's also a lot of things that even twins share. It's the same womb, it's the same levels of cortisol that are going through the bloodstream of the mother and stuff like that. So there's loads of kind of factors, very difficult to separate that out. But one of the things that I do know that has been universally recognized that seems to be definitely hereditary is sensitivity. That seems to be passed on generationally, and it's definitely got a hereditary predisposition. And as you rightly said there, those who are neurodiverse are highly sensitive. Yeah, so that's really interesting. That kind of reinforces the points.
And this is another point I wanted to raise. So I've always automatically coached and taught people. I think I'll be learning for my whole life and I'll be teaching for my whole life. And I recognise now that the people that I've always been reaching out to help are the highly sensitives, even though they've not known it. And if you're here listening for your highly sensitive child, there's a very good chance that you might be sensitive too and may not even have known that. So my period of depression, I was in my 20s, I was going out clubbing. I'm just going to be completely honest and authentic. I was doing lots of drugs. That was one of my coping mechanisms. I can talk about this openly now because I've healed the shame. I've got the self-compassion. And I talk about it because it's really important, because if our children are not supported and given the support tools, this is the path that they can go down. And with ADHD in particular, very, very high chance of going down the drugs route. And it's not about getting high. It's not about being grown up. I started off smoking, I started on cigarettes and then I started smoking hash. And I think that's kind of trying to calm that nervous system. So for anyone that doesn't know, for the highly sensitives, our brains are different. They're still learning about it, but they're getting more and more information. So our brains are different and our nervous system is different, and it's far more acute. So we are taking in far more information than other people. And that can be a lot, So taking drugs, that kind of was helping to numb or calm, and I'm not advocating for this, but I can see that where that coping strategy is a coping strategy.
I think referring to the kind of drug taking, as soon as you put it into the context of it self-medicating, that it is a case of, as you say, a coping strategy. It's so strange that we've still got that mentality that individuals who take drugs should be punished rather than, well, let's look at the reason why they're taking drugs. Why are they needing something else rather than what they currently have? And whether it's to self-medicate or whether it is to fit in or whatever the reason is. But yeah, for somebody on the neurodivergent spectrum, then yeah, it's that, as you say, how can I calm my brain if nobody tells me and gives me any tools to do it through other means and through other methods? Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, I mean, really, I want to get into the education system and get started in primary schools.
Yeah.
My daughter's struggles started in primary school because there can be a lot of issues with interpersonal relationships. Mm. But, the main thing to know is neurodivergent people are horrendously hard on themselves. I'm very hard I have been very hard on myself, and it's still there at times. And my daughter has been very hard on herself. So we really do not need other people being really hard on us. We need the opposite, and we need to learn to be compassionate with ourselves. So I had a real period of depression, and what happened, I didn't know it was depression. So I was going out clubbing with my friends. That's the stage I was at. I had lots of friends and I was the common denominator. So as always, I'm having a joint before I'll even go out the door. That's what I needed to help me. In the same way that other people, it might be a drink of alcohol. We've all got different coping strategies. Some are helpful, some are not. I'll talk about the helpful ones later. But I had a joint, went out to meet, and it was like, oh, that didn't make me feel better at all. That made me feel worse. And there was an awareness. So I went out and I thought, right, I'll have a drink, because that was the next thing we were going to do in a pub in town. That'll help me feel better. And it just didn't. So at least I went away. Took a moment to myself and I thought, right, Alison, if you go into this nightclub next door, which is the plan, you're going to go, and it was ecstasy at the time. You're going to go in there and you're going to take this, and there's no guarantees of how that's going to make you feel. And it's going to take you into a state that's going to last for 3 or 4 hours. And so far, what you've tried hasn't made you feel better. So the chances are that this may not be making you feel better either. So I did something which was really, my friends couldn't get. I don't know, it was just this real kind of, I need to get out of here. I can't do this. Don't know what's going on with me. Total overwhelm. I called it a breakdown, and I just said, look, I'm going home. You all go and have a nice night. I just need to go, and I can't talk to you right now. And I left. And I cried in the taxi home. I appeared. My brother, who I didn't have a good relationship with, opened the door and he was like, what's up? And I was like, I don't know. I just feel so sad. I just feel so bad. And he was like, what are you sad about? You've got a great life. You've got loads of friends. You've got a good job. There's always guys interested in you. Your life's great. And I was like, I know, but and you always cope. That was another thing. Well, I'm just sick of coping. I think that's what it was. I'm sick of coping, unsupported. So my parents came in from the night out, and my dad just walked in and was like, oh, emotions, straight back out the room. We don't deal with emotions. And my mum was like, oh, it's probably our time of the month. And I was like, oh my goodness, they just do not know me at all.
Yeah.
So I spent 3 days in my bedroom, and I wouldn't go to work. I wouldn't see friends. I wouldn't even eat with the family. And this was really not my normal behaviour. And at that point, I did write a poem, and it was very much, I didn't feel suicidal. I wasn't thinking about taking my own life, but nothing mattered.
Yeah.
Nothing had meaning. And it was like that. My poem was along the lines of, if I died, would it make a difference? So that's close enough, And I thought, right, I need help. And I said to my mum, who I wasn't close with, will you come to the doctor with me? Because I cannot live my life feeling this way. I need to get out of this. Doctor was amazing. I wanted my mum to come with me, even though I was in my 20s, because I was scared I would go to the doctor and pretend everything was fine. But I didn't. I went to the doctor. He knew family background, and I won't go into that. That's a whole other story. And I just went in, and I was there for about an hour, and I cried, and I told him how I felt. And he basically had said, okay, what you're feeling is not within the normal, range of emotions. So I'm going to give you antidepressants, and we'll get you some counselling. And I said, great, I will do anything that's going to make me feel better. However, I took the antidepressants for 5 days, and my body did not like them. I'm not, each to their own, and one size doesn't fit all, and that wasn't to be my path. So took them for 5 days. They were affecting my sleeping and my eating, and I thought, I know myself. If I'm not getting enough sleep, that's not going to help anything. So I came off them, and I was waiting for the counselling. So I went to the library, because we didn't have the internet back in the olden days. And I found The Power of Positive Thinking and a book about psychology. And that was my start of trying to understand myself, and realizing in some way that my thoughts I mean, it was a long journey from then. That was just the beginning, but that's where it all started, and it's been seeking my own help.
Yeah, definitely. So you started on that kind of journey as say, self-discovery. You mentioned there, you briefly mentioned it's about your own thoughts. And it was quite interesting what you mentioned earlier on related to kind of the neurodivergent, that you're often getting in trouble, you're often wrong. One of the things I kind of teach around behavior management stuff is so common for those who do have neurodivergence or some form of difference in the way they see the world. They don't meet the expectations of other people. And the fact that you should have listened. So you not doing what I've told you to do isn't necessarily because you didn't listen, you're being defiant, you're being difficult. It's because that 1,000 thoughts that are going around in your head, that was just one of them. And suddenly I could only hold on for that bingo ball for a moment before, another is disappeared into the machine and a different one's come out. But that's then from other people, they're going, being difficult, being naughty. So you get that constant criticism, that constant telling off. It's going to seep into the brain over a period of time, isn't it? That, if you get told something often enough, you're going to start to believe it, no matter, and especially for a younger child. So then you've got that. Yeah, then you've got that later on in your life, you've got a case of, I'm not good enough. I always get it wrong. I always mess up. I'm never good. I'll never be perfect. And those sorts of things that really hold you back. So it's, there is such a strong connection between mental health conditions and neurodivergence, mainly because of societal expectations on those individuals. Yeah.
That's one of the things I wrote in my notes that was really important. So my advice for any parents is forget all your expectations, throw them out the window. Do not follow the parenting books. None of that worked for me. The experts do not know you or your child the way you do. So timeouts, naughty step, all of these things that I got told, none of that worked for my daughter. None of that worked for my daughter. And another thing also really important here is when I let go of worrying about other people's judging my parenting and I did what I felt was right for my child, that's when I got things right.
Yeah.
And that included the school. I got told I was mollycoddling her, etc., etc. Then when we found out only last year that she's getting tested for ASD and ADD, and I'm sure oppositional defiant disorder will be in there too, and I'm sure that's me. But learning about it, learning about yourself, learning about your child, it will just open your mind to, that's why this and that's why that. And it really gives you more of an understanding. Another thing really important is a lot of how I parented my daughter was based on how I was parented.
Yeah.
And how I was parented was not good. And there's that, well, I wouldn't have got away with that. I would never have got away with that. So if you can do your own healing and let that go, doesn't matter. What's more important, trying to get them to do what you think they should be doing or keeping that connection? So when I started choosing having that connection with my child, which I didn't have with my parents, having that connection, because that's the most important. And that goes back to addictions. So the opposite of sobriety, the opposite of addiction is not sobriety, is connection. When connection is missing, that's another reason why people go for the drugs, basically. Yeah. So keeping that connection, dropping the expectations, having that understanding and compassion goes a long way. Because when I found out about myself through learning from my daughter, I cried for about 2 days. I really did. There was so much grief. Sorry. Okay. Still, it was hard. It was really hard. So that why I want to do this now is to save others going through what I went through. And that gets into the self-loathing. So if anybody knows Brené Brown, she is amazing to listen to she's the queen of shame. And I would say guilt and shame. So guilt to me is, Alison, that wasn't great. You could have done that better, you know? So take that as information. Don't hold on to the guilt. That wasn't great. You were triggered there. Somebody pushed your buttons and you've reacted, and it wasn't kind, and you can do better. But shame, that's a very different beast. And shame to me is, it's not I've done something wrong, it's I am wrong. I am wrong. And that's not a nice place. It's a really heavy emotion. So learning more, and there's so many books, there's so many audio books, there's so many people on YouTube, there'll be podcasts. Go and learn. And the more you learn, the more you'll understand, because it's really transformed my relationship with myself. Mm-hmm. Because generally my parents have been gone for 7-8 years now, and I still have that negative voice quite regularly. And I think most people may have that to a degree, but trust me, we can be really harsh with ourselves. So it's about teaching your children to be their own best friend and to be aware of that negative voice and to, talk back to it basically and think, well, that's just a thought and it's not true. It's not true. And help them really play to their strengths. Teach them all the things that are good about them, rather, because all they're getting is all the things that are wrong.
Yeah, definitely. I think you've already mentioned there that you've read numerous parenting books and things like that, and a lot of them didn't fit or definitely didn't connect with your daughter, but you had to overcome a lot of probably a little bit of prejudicial thinking, you say, from coming the scripts and the core beliefs that had come from your upbringing. And as you say, that you mentioned a couple of bits there. So one I always talk about is the scripts, that this is how you should behave, how you shouldn't behave. This is what you must do and what you mustn't do, that tend to come down from your parents. And then you then hold them. And it causes an emotional response when they're not met. And rationally, you can sometimes go, I always use an example of this, like, we all say when we're kids to our parents that we won't act like our parents. So it's like when they're sitting, making you eat your peas on your plate and you're going, when I have kids, I won't make me their peas if I don't like them. And then when you have kids, you let them off their peas because they're trying to leave their broccoli. There's starving children out there. There's people dying. Don't waste food. And you have that emotional reaction. And you have to be very, very self-aware to be able to recognize, just because I feel that in that moment, is that based on actual reality and facts and values that I really hold important still? Or is that scripts that have come down from my family of how you should and shouldn't behave?
100%. And being able to,
and if you have to adjust that, when you've got a child coming into your world, especially one that doesn't seem to be responding to typical parenting, you have to go back to that starting point, don't you? And kind of go, yeah, I'm starting again from here. I'm going, okay, I need to refigure out this whole parenting thing, because what my parents didn't give me a happy life, which, sounds like, and as you said, it was nice to hear that you were able to accept your parents' challenges, to know that they didn't do it because they're bad people. They did it because they didn't know better. And I think that's quite important, isn't it? That's a big part of that release of shame for yourself, I should imagine.
So following on from what you said about the expectations and the way we've been raised and what we've learned, a really good question to ask yourself is, if you're saying no to your child, why are you saying no? Are you saying no because it's dangerous, or you don't have the time right now, or for a good reason, it's not possible right now? Or are you saying no because that's the societal or your family expectation? And that's a really good way to catch yourself. Is there a good reason why I'm saying no, or could I say yes?
I think there's also a knee-jerk reaction with the no as well. No buys you time. When you're looking at, and when you're looking at kind of sales, for instance, and there's human psychology involved in everything in life, isn't there? But when you're going through sales, when you ask people a question, are you interested in this? The immediate reaction is sometimes no, we're not interested in that, because it feels safe. No gives you control in that moment. And I used to do it when I was, parenting my lad when he was younger. He used to ask me something. My instinct would just go, no. And then I'd think about it and go, I've changed my mind actually. But it just bought me that time to kind of go, do I want to do this? Do I want to do this? What you expand on, the question why, I think is huge. And I always encourage 3 whys, because that's what children do to you. when you go no, they go, but why? But why? But why? So if you can't answer why 3 times in a row, then you've probably not got a good justification for saying no. Don't touch that. Why? Because it's electric and it could hurt you. Why? Because then you could die and I'd have to look after you. Why? Because I love you very much and I just don't want that to happen to you. Now, 3 whys of genuine reasons, not just because I said so.
And really interesting, because neurodivergent children, and probably just highly sensitive children in general, are very curious. They're always asking questions. I mean, I did really well in debating at school. My daughter could definitely negotiate with terrorists. We can be very persuasive. So my parents would not have had the dialogue that we have. But she helps me to change my mind sometimes when I take the time, and she'll put forward a really good case and I'll go, okay, yep, you're right. I agree with that. So I will modify my behaviour. Because you're quite right. Why should I be allowed to talk to you like that just because you're the child and I'm the adult? If I don't want you to talk to me like that, that's not reasonable. So they can be exhausting. They can be exhausting with the endless questions, but it's a natural curiosity and it's not a bad thing. And before I forget, one of the books that really did help me, and I can't remember the author, but I'm sure it was, You Can't Make Me, but I Can Be Persuaded. And it was that book was quite life-changing for me, because it was different, and it was all about having a strong-willed child. And I was like, of course, I'm a strong, and this goes back to the links into the no as well. So, we are going to rebel. We don't like getting told no. And one of the really good bits of advice in that book was, do not back them into a corner, because they will cut off their nose to spite their face every time. So you want to create a win-win. So don't back them into, if you don't do this, then this is going to happen. This will be your punishment. Disciplining, absolutely. Punishment, no. Different, very different. So give them a way out. Give them a way. Once they've backed themselves into that corner, give them a way out. So give them choices. Always give them choices, and always give them a sense of control. Even that doesn't always work, because I would say to my daughter, okay, so you can do A or you can do B, but she would want C, so we would still have some debate. I'm not saying that solved everything, but it is a good tool.
It's a shift over to a more collaborative approach rather than authoritarian approach. I think there is, again, it's an old script, isn't it? That adults know best and children should just do what they're told. I think there's a massive mistake made, and although it has worked, we're seeing the negative repercussions of it, of the kind of the behaviorist punishment reward parenting. Do something good, you get something good; do something bad as a consequence. We kind of think that conditions children to behave in the right way, but for many kids, it just doesn't work, and they just fight against it, and we just create this disconnect. As you mentioned, the most important thing is the connection between, whereas a collaborative approach is the kind of hey, let's figure this out together. And social modeling, social learning is a more powerful tool. We tend to learn from the behaviors of others as animals. That works better. So if you're collaborative, empathic, supportive, understanding, willing to adjust your behavior based on new information, well, what would we want from a child? I always kind of teach it that, I don't want a child to use good manners just because they're being obedient and scared not to. I want them to use good manners because they prefer to do that because they think it's a nice thing to do. And because it's been role model, it's a nice thing to do. And I think that's, yeah.
Well, I did get told that I was never going to, the way I was going to help my child the best, she was going to learn by example. She wasn't going to learn by being told.
No.
Because highly sensitive people are reading people all the time. They don't just respect an authority figure because they're told to respect an authority figure. They will respect the people that are worthy of their respect. So it's a big shift. We were always taught that you have to always, respect your elders, respect your teachers. I teach my daughter because I've had to advocate for her and teach her to advocate for herself. And I've said, just because somebody is older than you, it doesn't mean that they're right or they know better. I've taught her not to be rude because that doesn't generally tend to get you anywhere quickly. But I've taught her to speak up for herself if she believes they're wrong, because there's still not enough understanding around highly sensitives. And the more I research this, that there's varying figures, but it's somewhere between 15 and 30% of people are highly sensitive. That's nearly 1 in 3. It's a lot of us. It's not a small minority. So I really feel that we need to learn more and raise more awareness about it.
Yeah, definitely. So let's go on to obviously your daughter discovering her neurodivergence through TikTok, and I know she's not the only person who's done a similar thing to that, and then sharing that with you. So yeah, talk about that experience of did you start going down the TikTok rabbit hole as well?
Well, no, but I went searching for answers online too. TikTok's too short. I was looking for more information, but that's what they take in. So through school, there were issues. There was self-harming. There was, and this is the thing, this is back to the what's wrong about you. There was problems with interpersonal relationships. Highly intelligent person, not doing well in certain classes. And actually, her school report, which I highlighted to the teachers in my comments, was, depending on who the teacher is, this sounds like 2 entirely different people that we're talking about. And I'm sure that's how I would have been perceived at school. Some teachers loved me, some teachers loathed me, and a big part of that was, were they engaging me? And, how were they behaving towards me? Because if they weren't being respectful towards me, they're not going to get the best out of me. Then there's going to be the resentment. And I think insolence was a word that was on a report card. I obviously had a real problem with that teacher, but other ones loved me. So that's the difference. It's the same person, but how are you and how are they interacting with you? So, and back to your question, what was it? How did we discover? So I had been to the school many times. I was getting told Amber catastrophizes, she this, she that, all the negatives, which now that I've learned, massive red flags for neurodiversity and ADHD. And I've gone back to them and pointed this out and said, you need to learn more. You need to learn more about this massive portion of the population, because all of these things, it was a complete lack of support. And I would go to them and say, Amber's highly intelligent, but that is not transferring into her work. And I gave an example. So she always seemed to be on the move and I'd be like, are you listening to me? This is important. And she would be able to recite back to me exactly what I'd been saying, but it looked as though she wasn't paying attention or taking it in. So she's been at school all day. Our brains are different. With the neurodiversity, there's something going on with the neurotransmitters that we are not getting the dopamine. So the dopamine's one of the things that helps us to motivate us, helps us to focus. And that runs out. And when that runs out, and that person's not being very interesting, or that subject's not very interesting, and you've got all the distractions of the noise and the other things going on, it's quite impossible, really. But then coming home from school to sit and do homework, that was just no, I'm out, I'm done. My reserves are gone. And we clashed over homework until primary 7. And And we had a moment, actually. I'm trying to cook dinner because we were going out to an activity and we're trying to do this homework, and we always fought. And I'm burning the dinner. And I thought, this is bloody ridiculous. This is not on. I am not living my life like this anymore. And I said, right, forget it. We're not doing homework tonight. Oh, but I need to do homework in order to be able to do my lesson. So I scribbled a note in my overreactive state, and I got a phone call from the school the next day and said, she needs to do her homework. And I said, no, she doesn't. Homework should not be a requirement for her to participate in class. I am not prepared to ruin my relationship with my child over homework. So you need to do your lessons in a way that if she hasn't done her homework, she can still participate. And I said, homework is not a legal obligation. Now, I want to support my child. This is not supporting my child. It's not working for her.
Thank you for listening to the Able to Care podcast. If you're enjoying this episode, please like, comment, and share. We really appreciate all of you listeners. One of the things, obviously, you've been on a tremendous journey yourself of self-discovery, but also as far as, understanding your daughter as well. I can tell that there's obviously things that if you could go back, you recognize that you potentially would have done differently. Have you gone through a lot of, like you mentioned, the guilt and the shame as well, and shame related to your past and your history and overcoming that for who you are as a person now? Have you had to do that a little bit as far as parenting's concerned as well?
Oh, yeah. And that's another thing. This is a thing that was very different from my parents' parenting. I don't think I ever heard the words, I'm sorry, I was wrong. So I have had, trust me, I'm a single parent. She does have a very good relationship with her dad, but in this household, just the two of us. Mm. So at one stage when I was perimenopausal and my daughter was just starting on that hormonal journey, 2 people with ADHD with hormones going in the one household without a buffer, explosive. Missiles have been thrown, doors have been slammed, lots of that stuff. And sometimes I didn't do everything right in the moment. And I've taken myself away to my bedroom and I've cried because I've been ashamed that I've behaved like my mother, or, this is not how I want to be as a parent. But I can go to my daughter, not when she's in the emotional overwhelm, or I am when we've both calmed down and I've been able to say, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I don't want to behave that way. This is the way I was brought up. And sometimes when I get when you really annoy me, when you really push my buttons, then this is what comes out. But I'm sorry, and I don't want to be that way. And that heals that bond again. Would I have done things differently? Probably not, because I didn't have any better information. What I will say is the drug taking that continued for a lot of years, as I learned other tools, that naturally fell away as I forged the bonds with the people that got me. So this is something that I bang on about all the time. Neurodiverse people are square pegs trying to fit into a round hole, right? Doesn't work. The only way a square peg fits into a round hole is if you chop bits off of it for it to fit. And then you're not really being you, and this is the masking. And another thing, I could go into the masking, but don't try too hard to fit in. Yes, we need to fit in certain places, but maybe these other places need to change in order to accommodate us. So I got told years ago, I was on a teacher training for one of the many modalities that I trained in my search for meaning and purpose and understanding. And we were learning a certain thing, and the woman, very wise, had said to me, okay, you're all here to learn this. However, what do you want for you? So ADHD, impatient, intolerant. And she said, what do you want for you? And I said, well, I'd like to be more patient and I'd like to be more tolerant. because I don't like being mean to people. I don't like being abrupt. I don't like, reacting that way. And also it's really, if I can be more patient, it's less frazzling for me, but this has been a lifelong lesson. And she tuned in and she came back and said, well, impatient, intolerant people get things done and create change. And this is a big part of who you are. So maybe we just get you to embrace that impatience and intolerance. And I was like, wow. Part of me thought, oh no, I'm never going to get better at this. Yes, you can. And it might take a long time, or it might not. But embracing it and accepting it as part of who I was. And yes, we are the people that we've got a good bullshit detector. And we will speak up for the underdog. And we hate injustice. So we will, if we think something's wrong, we're not just going to accept it. We're going to say, that's wrong. And that's one of the things that gets us into a lot of trouble.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's something we should necessarily change.
No, it is interesting. It's such an easy thing to do, to actually, when you kind of put it into a common sense approach, flipping behaviors that we feel are negative over into a positive. So defiance, as an example, if we switch that over, so you mean assertive? It's a case of being willing to say no to things you don't want to do. So it's always that shift in labeling as far as defiant or like I always kind of refer to as, violence is wrong until you put somebody in a boxing ring and then they're going to pay millions for it. So it's all about context. It's all about shifting that. So somebody who's controlling, for instance, I always kind of refer to, well, I'm quite controlling and I run 5 companies and I don't think I'd be able to do that if I wasn't controlling to some degree or another. Controlling people, it may not be appropriate. Controlling my businesses, is something that's, I can utilize that skill in the right way in the right time and it becomes a positive. That's like leaning into the strengths again, isn't it, Alison, as far as, but it's being able to recognize those strengths in yourself and realize they are strengths rather than being told they're weaknesses, definitely.
Yeah. So, and it may be that I when I'm coaching clients, if they're struggling to think of what's good about them, I say, go and ask people that care about you. Go and ask people that love you. What are the things about me that you like? So, right, here we go. So for young boys and young girls, oh, you look really pretty. It's, let's not keep teaching our children that our girls, that their worth is all in how they look, because see all that look good, feel good. Yeah. I spent years of my life trying to look good, did not make me feel any better. No. Let's not base our worth. And for boys, it's all about being strong. And that can be really to their detriment, as we know, as well. So teaching them, understanding that they're emotional, they feel things deeply. They really feel things deeply. And another thing that I really wanted to mention that I don't want to miss is because they're picking up so much about other people's emotions, how other people feel, they can take that responsibility on. I've had, girls in secondary school, and I'm like, she's taking on this responsibility for her family, and it's teaching them, this is not your responsibility. I'm the grown up. You don't need to worry about me. I'm here to look after you. Yeah. It's okay to be considerate of people, but not to their own detriment, because that's one of the things that we really do, over-empathizing.
Yeah.
And it's too much for a child. Their brains aren't even fully, their brains aren't even fully developed, and the neurodiverse brains take even longer, which I've just learned.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it also can create a bit of a negative life model, as far as I am valued if I am there for somebody else, if I am needed, if I am caring for somebody else. That's the only way that I have a purpose and a need. And that can obviously lead to vulnerabilities in adult relationships when they get that far, of going, I need to be trying to fix this person. I need to be the rescuer. I need to be, and that's,
This takes me on to another really important thing. So teaching your children autonomy, which they're not really taught, and boundaries. because there's so many women that live their whole lives in the people pleasing, because we're taught to be a good girl, and this is if you behave this way, then that's good, and you're loved. But if you behave that way, and this can get into, if you're bossy, let's get out of bossy, so that you're a leader. So it's changing the vocabulary, but with them, we teach our children to be polite, and I'm not saying that's wrong, but let me give you a really good example. So my daughter's just about to turn 18. She's part-time waitressing. She works in a restaurant 0.2 miles from my home. And the reason I know that is because I checked it after an instant. She was coming home from work at 11:30 at night, and it was foggy. And she noticed a man on his phone stationary as she came into the street just round the corner from us. And she was aware of him. So she messaged her boyfriend. She tried to phone him and he didn't answer, and she said, please phone me as soon as you can. Continued home. So this man came up behind, he crossed the road, came up behind her as she's trying to go home, and he put his hand on her shoulder. So I've said to her, number one, nobody should ever be touching you. And any grown man with good intentions should know that he doesn't come up behind you, So at that stage, we talked through the whole experience. So basically, he had Google Maps on his phone, and he was asking for directions to a place not far. And she struggled to understand what he was saying. But, she wanted to be helpful. We always want to be helpful. And she was trying to help him and be polite. So she put this, destination in his phone and said, you just follow the arrows. And it was that way. But he continued following her the other way. Yeah. And then he wanted to thank her. He offered her a drink out of an opened can. And she said, no, thank you.
Yeah.
But this is the real thing that I went onto social media to highlight to other mothers. And he then was trying to manipulate her. It's teaching them about not being manipulated. And he was trying to manipulate her by saying, you're not being very polite. I'm trying to say thank you by giving you this.
Yeah.
But she was savvy enough to say, well, I'm not going to drink that, So it all ended up fine. Her boyfriend phoned. He then started saying, do you have a boyfriend? Where do you live? Can I be your boyfriend? Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
The boyfriend phoned and said, tell him I'm your boyfriend. I live around the corner and I'm on my way. So that was the end of that. But police were involved in all sorts of things. And it could all have been very different. But that was a real learning opportunity to sit down and say, you were concerned about him. Because we've all told our children, go to a door in the street or do it. But in that stress and in that anxiety, we don't always do the right thing. So it's an opportunity to talk through it all. But when I was saying to her, why, when you felt so concerned and upset and frightened, why did you feel that you had to? I just wouldn't have engaged, just and run. Don't be scared to run if you feel, but they don't want to look foolish.
Yeah. It's the people pleasing aspect. There's also, I think, another big one is the fear of missing out, is another kind of big feeling. Rejection anxiety is huge within the neurodivergent community, as far as if I don't go along with this, they will reject me. And I feel hypersensitive to that. Therefore, I've damaged relationship. I won't have friends. And we then catastrophize as a result of that. And I think it was an interesting thing that you were talking about there, as far as the kind of the personal safety. I think teaching about boundaries and appropriate boundaries, like I always say, the old mentality of don't talk to strangers, well, just doesn't work. It's not applicable. You can't utilize that. That's why some of us stand at a lift with somebody who's no danger to us whatsoever and just refuse to communicate because we've got that old script. But if they went, hello, my name is, they're no longer a stranger, I can talk to them. It still may not be safe for children. So I think there's a lot of understanding what is safe, what isn't safe. But I think being able to go, I don't feel comfortable with that, so a no from me, and being able to walk away is a huge skill.
Yeah, well, 100%. Because strengths, again, of the neurodiverse and highly sensitive is they tend to be very psychic and they tend to be very intuitive. And I got told that all the time, but nobody told me what that meant. So being psychic is just reading the room, reading the person. So if we can teach them to trust your gut, trust what you're feeling, trust your instincts, and if somebody, so this is one of the things with me, it's the bullshit detector again. And this goes back into this not respecting. Really teach them to trust themselves, because that's the best navigating system, because that's always going to be there. But often I would think, I don't like that person, right? That would be my initial, I don't like you. Took me a very long time to work out, or no, that's not true. I'm getting this wrong. I used to think they don't like me. That's what it was. I'd be getting this sense of, oh, they don't like me. Took me time to work out it was me not liking them, me not liking their energy. And often what that actually meant was, you're lying to me. And I'm picking up on the fact that the words that are coming out your mouth are not marrying up with the information that I'm picking up.
Yeah, that's interesting. So what would you suggest for any parent out there who is recognizes or thinks that their child seems to be highly sensitive? What are your kind of key suggestions, like your top tips?
So top tips are, go and learn as much as you possibly can learn. There are books about highly sensitive children. The more you can learn about them and understand about them, the easier it's going to be for you. The more you can then teach them, because when things are going on, and this is great for my daughter's boyfriend as well, he's great with her, but sometimes when what would have been a big eruption or a fallout in the past, I'll say, listen, I know this is really difficult for you, and this is just part of your ADHD. And that just kind of is teaching him and teaching her. So teach them learn about them first, teach them about themselves, keep raising awareness, keep advocating for them, have compassion for yourselves as well, because it is challenging. I'm not saying that they require a lot more support, they require a lot more energy, but trust me, when you can come from that place of understanding, it's going to just completely transform your relationship. My daughter and I are like that. And often she will say to me, I probably shouldn't, probably most people wouldn't tell their mums this, but, so have her back, have their back, have his back, because 50% of highly sensitives are boys as well. If they know that they can trust you to have their back, no matter what, then they're going to come to you.
So obviously you've developed your own kind of business around the things you've learned over the last 3 decades. Empowerment Path is the name of your business, and we will put a link in the script notes to your Facebook page and website if it comes out soon. So what is it you do who do you support, and what is it you do with people?
So I'm in the very early stages, and I thought I would have been starting my business when Amber went to primary school, and then I thought I'd start it when she was going to high school. But obviously there was so much more that I had to learn, and obviously I do believe in divine timing. So I'm just in the initial stages, and really it's the highly sensitives. And that is not just the children. That can be middle-aged men that have never understood that they're a sensitive as well. Because it's especially difficult for boys who have to be, and men who have to be strong. So I am all about advocating and educating and supporting, teaching people the support tools. Another thing really important for the highly sensitives, best advice, is understand their triggers, know what's going to overwhelm them, and allow them the downtime. They need the downtime, the decompression time. That's okay. They need to withdraw. Give them that kind of safe space. Give them the timeouts, just not the timeouts as being naughty. I got to the stage where, when I was changing, I took myself away. I thought, right, we're going into that zone that's not going to be productive. And I'm getting irate. So I'm going to walk away till I calm down and I can respond rather than react. So I don't know exactly where it's going. There's a big, big project here. So anybody that this reaches that can be of assistance, I'm just talking about it. I'm working with Business Gateway. I feel there has to be big changes in education. So I'm starting small. I'm working with parents, working with individuals, and that can be a challenge too. How do you get these people, the ones that are really struggling, that are isolated in their bedroom, how do you get them to engage? So really my bigger vision is a place, a physical centre that has all the things that brings another really important thing, to help them to find their joy. See, when life is feeling difficult and they feeling like they don't fit in, or it's too hard, help them find their joy. So often that can be creative things, it can be animals, it can be nature. That's all really important things. And teach them, learn about the nervous system and how to calm the nervous system. Find all the things that are beneficial for them. So yeah, I'm here to advocate, change opinions, talk about it, hopefully get into the education system and start educating the educators a wee bit more.
Excellent, Alison. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. If this has affected anybody or anybody is interested in finding out more, please like, share, follow on whether you're listening to this or watching it on YouTube. I'll see the details or connect to Alison with the information in the show notes or in the extra bits, the description on YouTube. But yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me.